There isn't. Do you want me to get started or no? Now I can go? All right, it's a good thing my husband's paying attention over there to tell me when I can and cannot get started. So for those of you who are on live stream, we won't be able to hear your comments, but what we will be able to do is see your comments. So we've got a few people who will be able to let us know if you do have any comments. So,
YouTube only.
What?
YouTube only.
YouTube only for comments back.
I didn't hear you, sorry.
So if you are on YouTube watching from home, we will be able to monitor your comments and we will share them in the room. We are not able to do that quite as easily from Facebook, but I'll keep my eye on Facebook. But for sure, if you add a comment to YouTube, we'll be able to get it in the room.
You know what you're talking about better for live stream because I only have to do this once a quarter, which I am thankful for because I don't think I'm as good at doing that. So our agenda today is actually a nice short agenda. We're going to do an opening prayer, review agenda, which is right now. I always think I should switch those two. Sharing our blessings information, building lasting community, talking about the sanctuary refresh, staffing update, and Sunday mornings this fall, which you heard a little bit about it this morning. Financial report, and just a closing prayer. So Pastor will let you know this anytime you want to know. I'm not great about leading prayer, but I might as well be the one to do it because the only way you learn to get better is trying yourself. So let's say a short prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for giving us this beautiful day and for being here together and on live stream. May you bless everyone who is here, all of our friends, all of our families, and anyone who needs a couple of extra blessings today. Amen. May not be perfect, but hey, I try. So the next slide. I hate looking backwards constantly, so I always try to print my slides too. So sharing our blessings. Yes.
So you will recall that over the at the congregational meeting last October, the congregation voted to share $30,000 with the wider community. We formed a task group to work on how are we going to do that, what was going to be our criteria, and they were to make recommendations to the council. They have worked diligently over the last, since December. The members of the team, both Joyce and Pastor Dave Gerhardt came on a little later to help us in actually evaluating the grants. The other folks have served on the team from starting in December. They did their work faithfully and diligently. They made their recommendations to council earlier in July, and council approved them, and checks have been sent to the recipients. So we are pleased that we have shared one-time grants with Family Promise of Wayne County, with Learning Links of Fairport, and with the Open Door Mission. We will talk over the coming year find ways to talk about each of those ministries and the ways that we are invited to participate with them, the kinds of ministries that they are doing. And today we are pleased that we have Becky Wilson from Learning Links. Becky, I'm going to invite you to come forward. Can I borrow your mic? And we just wanted to hear directly from, you're going to have to hold it right up to your face. It's on.
Hello.
Hello, perfect.
Hi.
So Becky, welcome. We're really glad to have you here. Can you tell us what is your role with Learning Links?
I'm sure you've probably heard what Learning Links is now. It's a tutoring and mentoring program at the Pines of Perrington. I started out as a tutor and then became a coordinator, and now I'm the board secretary and a vice president of Learning Links.
Yeah. And Bethlehem has had a long time partnership. We've had people in the congregation who have served as tutors. We have, for many summers, supplied and provided school supplies that are part of your back to school giveaway that you do with students. And the proposal that Learning Links made to us was to expand their back to school program. So can you tell us about kind of what was the vision behind
Okay.
that?
When Learning Links started 13 years ago, we had maybe like 25 students, and we felt they needed supplies, and the tutors would help, and we were able to do that. And then what used to be one night of tutoring turned to be 3 nights because we've got so many kids that we have like 100 students that we help tutor now. And for the past couple years, we've been giving out about 125 bags of school supplies. We fill up a brown bag with their class lists, school supplies, and they also get to pick out a new backpack. But we were turning away siblings of these kids. If they didn't come to tutoring, we turned them away, and it was heartbreaking to turn away a child that needed supplies. So our vision was to open it up to everybody at the Pines of Perrington. As you know, it's a low-income housing development for those less fortunate. If I can expand a little bit, is that a lot of these families are from, they're immigrants from other countries, and they really want to learn. They're there to learn. They want to start out school on an even page with their peers. So for them to have school supplies, and roughly when we first started doing backpacks, it was like $50 for roughly how much you spend on school supplies. Well, now with inflation and everything, it's like $75, and that's not including their clothing, their new sneakers, or a backpack. So, and a lot of these families have more than one kid, so that's a lot of money for these families that, as you gave out today the food, these are families that need the food, so every little bit of helps. And I can't thank you enough for what you have done in the past, what you're doing this year, and it's just, they are so thankful. I mean, these families cry when they get their supplies. To see a kid dump his bag out on the grass when he gets it, it's, as you remember as a child when you went out and got your school supplies, how exciting it was. It's really overwhelming to see what your work has done for these kids. They're very appreciative.
Yeah, and we are appreciative for the work that we get to do through you to do this. And so part of what Learning Links, their vision is to keep expanding so that any low-income student in the school district who needs school supplies will have access to them. And they have worked, they work in partnership with the school districts to make sure that excess supplies are fed directly to the schools so things aren't wasted. I mean, there's things, everything that is gathered is put to use. The grant that Bethlehem has provided is kind of the first step. It's their first step of faith this year to expand their program, and their hope is to continue to grow that over time. But Bethlehem's grant is kind of that first, enables them to take that first leap of faith in expanding.
Yes, like you mentioned, we are trying to reach outside. Poverty isn't just in the Pines. There's poverty elsewhere in Fairport, but we're giving it out at the Pines. It's one location, and they're called Title I students that get free and reduced lunch. It's a confidential list that I don't get to see, nobody gets to see. There's like one person the school district gets to see, but we're appealing to families, they're not, like I said, not all at the Pines. And so the district is really thankful too to see your church be the stepping stone to reach all these other kids in the district. So again, thank you so much.
Yeah. So be on the lookout. We're going to get an email out this week about ways that, beyond just providing school supplies, but ways that you can help to participate in preparing the bags, being part of the giveaway. We'll get that information out to you this week. And it's not just Bethlehem that is part of that process. School teachers, many school teachers in the district, other folks in community groups and businesses participate as well. So it's just another way for us to partner in the community with that ministry. Any questions? I'm going to have you come forward, Julie, and I'm going to have you use a microphone so people at home can hear you. I know you can't. Well, then speak behind them.
Okay, yeah, can I stand behind you and speak? So I just wanted to touch a little bit more on all of the connections and the ripple effect. Oh gosh, thanks, Lil. So Pastor Amy mentioned this morning about the food giveaway on Wednesday. It's another connection that we have to the Pines. Where did Kate go?
Kate had to leave.
Kate had to leave, but Kate has been phenomenal in helping. It's not just a one-time giveaway of school supplies. I can't tell you the number of stories she has shared with me of graduates who have come back to be part of the giveaway, or just to be able to volunteer or provide support or mentorship for the kids that are in the program. So for me, that's important as well, to understand that it's not just a one-time we're providing supplies and away they go. These are kids that we are equipping for not only this year, but the years ahead, and that to me is just super, super important. This year in particular was very difficult at the Pines, and we had many volunteers here that helped because of the fire that was in the Pines. So just keeping that in mind as well, I think, is super important for us to remember. So thank you for all that you are doing, and I see Kathy sitting back here too. Kathy tutors at Learning Links. And she has shared stories of how impactful that has been and what a difference this community has helped to make in being a part of that program. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And if you have questions, if you want to learn more about the tutoring program, I'd invite you to talk to Kathy Gottemeyer. Kathy, can you just raise your hand? She is one of the people at Bethlehem who is involved with Learning Links, and so she's a great source if you have questions. Thanks for being with us today.
All right, the next slide. We're going to talk about, this is why I grabbed my paper too.
Working on it.
Thank you. Is sanctuary refresh. We love our sanctuary. Would you like to talk about it? This is one of my easier meetings because I keep handing off the mic instead of needing to talk.
So Sanctuary Refresh, you may have noticed that the bubbles in this carpet have been increasing every summer. The bubbles get bigger and bigger, and every year we say, yep, we really need to do something about that carpet. So a couple weeks ago, Pastor Amy and I got Bob Stoltz on the phone and said, we can't wait anymore. What are we going to do? Bob Stoltz came in with an arsenal of tools. He had tape, he had glue, he had a staple gun. Turns out he staple gunned down all of the bubbles in the carpet throughout the sanctuary. One might imagine that is effective, but perhaps not sustainable. So that led to a conversation to say we really need to think about the flooring in here in a way that's not going to require our chair of the property committee to come down every week and bubble and staple down whatever new bubbles have arisen. Well, if we pay attention to the flooring, we really also need to ask, what's our configuration of this space that works for how we use it now? Live stream is here to stay. Thankfully, it's a way to keep connected with the people who cannot be in this physical space. But what we hear from our live stream folks is not everything we do here can be heard well, particularly when our musical groups play and worship. The only place that there is amplification is the altar, the pulpit, and somebody holding or wearing a device. That means our choir is only picked up through those kind of ambient connections. So we should pay attention to, maybe we need like a hanging down microphone thing. I'm not in charge of sound, that's why I call it a hanging down microphone thing. There are people who know how to do that. We will forever need a person or two sitting back directing all of this. They are working off of a folding table right now. If that is a permanent part of our sanctuary, perhaps we ought to think about a setup that is a little bit more permanent. Again, we should decide on what that is before putting flooring on underneath it. And finally, you've noticed this year, I hope, that while we have all the same musical groups that we've always had with the choir and the bell choir and the kids choir, we're doing way more with engaging musical accompaniment in worship. And we kind of fit people in nooks and crannies as we can in this very small but kind of fixed space. Let's make sure that we have a space for all of our musicians to actually play in a way that helps to support what we do in worship. That might mean looking at slightly different configurations of some seating. It might mean taking out a couple of pews or a few more to put in flexible seating to allow us to remove them so a musical group can fit in that space. So we're asking the Sanctuary Refresh Committee to pay attention to all of these pieces to make sure this space is configured in a way that matches how we need to use it currently. Any questions about the mission of this committee? So many questions. Bill?
Whatever happened to the lights that used to be hanging down? There's two small holes where they used to have lights hanging here years ago.
There apparently are two small holes because there used to be mics hanging from there years ago. There is nodding. I know nothing of that, but I am sure the Sanctuary Refresh Committee will look into it and consider our current resources and how to amplify them. Mike?
I was a little busy. Did you mention who's on the committee yet?
Not yet. I was just making sure we were clear on the mission of the committee. Any other questions? So quickly, like, nod if you think you understand why we need to do this, like this makes sense. Okay, good, just wanted to make sure. So the committee will include Bob Stoltz, our property chair, David Chafee, who has agreed to chair the committee and herd these cats, Margie Gall, who is one of our officers, so she will serve as that connection to council. And she plays in the bell choir and has for a long time, as well as has offered some of the additional musical support. Sometimes she does some percussion or some flute. Raylan Clare, our organist, Jim Jeffers, our choir director, and one of the pastors. We might tag team it, might be one or the other. So hopefully it's a small committee that can work quickly in pulling these pieces together and making some recommendations. You'll notice right now they have no funding, so they will have to come back to all of you to pay for it, but they need to do a little work on figuring out what are the considerations and a plan to put together, and then you'll expect to hear from them in that process as well as to request money to fund this project. Okay? In the meantime, thank Bob Stoltz for him and his staple gun.
All right, building lasting community. Staffing update. This was a placeholder, and I didn't really add additional information here.
I can give an update, I guess, between Pastor Hoffman and I. Beth Schoenfeld left her position in June 17th, mid-June. And so since then, Pastor Hoffman and I have been office staff, communication staff, website updates. We know so much now about technology. I mean, it's just, we're almost dangerous. Almost being the key word. So, we are grateful. We are grateful because Sarah Morissette has been just picking up some of our just basic office responsibilities. She's been doing that through the summer, and she's expressed an availability to continue to do that until we have a staff person in place. Sarah Morissette sings in the church choir. She's got a young daughter, Quinn. That might be how you know who she is. Quinn, and she also has a son as well, but Quinn is the one that is often with her in church on Sunday mornings. Ruth Sleeman she had previously been involved in kind of the first draft of the bulletin each week, and so she's just continued to move from first draft to completion of the draft, so she's just doing that as, not just, but she does that as a volunteer. Kathy Gottemeyer is just coming to church and doing a walkthrough on a weekly basis to kind of make sure that just the facility is in good shape, that if there's any cleanup that needs to happen, that we're aware of that, and so Kathy's been doing that. Margie and a group of other volunteers has stepped up to make sure the bulletin gets produced every week. So we are grateful that we've got volunteers in place who are just kind of keeping things moving along. Pastor Hoffman and I are, Pastor Hoffman is taking primary responsibility for the production of our star email each week that we've been sent out. One of the things that we did shortly before Beth left was to sit down with Capra Strategies, who are the people who developed our website, and to say, Okay, because we launched a new website 2 years ago this summer. It's already been 2 years, in order to make it more functional. And what we realized before Beth announced that she was leaving was that we were at a point where we needed to now do some additional work, both with the website, but with just our communications in general. The ways that we communicate, the ways that we connect with people need to change. And so we're working with Capra Strategies to help us to develop some of those methods of how we will communicate and what are the templates that we're going to put in place to use as our communication going forward. So we are working with Capra to kind of figure out the communication piece. And then once we have some greater clarity about that, we are aware that Beth's position had changed quite a bit over the 8 years that she was in that position. And so we've asked to just hold off on filling Beth's position, not because we don't need it, but because we want to make sure that when we fill the position, we're filling for our current needs and not our past needs. We know that we need some different communication than what we've used in the past, and so we want to make sure that we're able to bring someone in who has the ability to help us, help our volunteers who provide our live stream, to provide some of the support for them, to help provide support for our podcast that we do on a weekly basis. So we just need to make sure that we're clear about what the skills are that are needed so that we can hire or we can help train someone to do those pieces. What else about our staff position? Yeah, we have a much bigger use of social media. One of the reasons that we knew about Sarah Morissette is that she has been a volunteer just helping to post things on social media. But we are aware that there are many people in our congregation whose primary knowledge about what is happening in the life of this community is through social media. And so if that's where they are, we have to be more present and we have to be more strategic about how we're communicating in things like social media. And so that's what we're trying to figure out too, so that we can figure a position that fits what we need going forward rather than what we needed in the past. We're still going to need some support for our facility. Beth was very involved in supporting our facility. We're still going to need some support for volunteers, which Beth was also really actively involved in. And so we're just trying to figure out what are the pieces of this, and then, I don't know if it's going to be one person or maybe pieces, like smaller pieces of several people who can pick up pieces of that work. So we're trying to figure that out in the next soon. I get anxious as I think about September. So we're trying to figure that out and then try to move forward. So as soon as we have some clarity about what it is that we're looking for, we will get the word out and ask you to help us share so that we can hopefully move forward with the kinds of positions and the people that will help us do the ministry that we need to do. Have I missed anything? Any questions? Yeah.
More of a much general question. I mean, before COVID, 2 services, and that seemed to work. Now, COVID and with virtual, do you think we'll ever go back to 2 or 1 is enough?
Yeah. So Jerry's question is, prior to COVID, we had 2 services, and since we've had, in the last year, we've had 1 service and we have continued live stream. We anticipate continuing live stream indefinitely. It is clear to me that people are connecting on a regular basis. There are people who primarily and only participate in the life of this community through live stream, and I think that is here to stay. And so we continue to try to figure out how do we serve a community that we don't necessarily see on a weekly basis. And I think the other thing I would say is we made a decision to move to 1 service last fall as we started planning, because what we heard from people was we are so disconnected as a community that we don't want to have opportunities when we gather for worship and not everyone that we're connected to has a chance to be present in that space. And so we made a decision last fall to go to 1 service in my sense, it's served us well this year because when we gather as a community, and it's a virtual connection and it's an in-person connection. I have not yet seen what I think is kind of that tipping point where we might need to move back to a second service. But we continue to kind of evaluate and think about what that might look like. What else would you say?
I was going to point out that we put the header as building lasting community. That is very clearly the vision that we've laid out coming out of our 100th anniversary, that's what we are about in the next 100 years, or at least for the next year or 5. And building lasting community now, I don't think we can quite say post-COVID, at this stage of the pandemic, looks different. You may notice that the people who are here on Sunday morning is a smaller number of people than it was before the pandemic. I believe, and I think Pastor Amy agrees, the size of our congregation has not significantly shrunk. The bulk of our congregation is not necessarily in this physical space on Sunday morning. So part of that building lasting community means showing up where people are who call this community home and those who don't yet call it home, which means not having what happens here on Sunday morning be exclusive. That's part of why we launched the podcast, is to reach people. Okay, if they're out there listening to podcasts, they can still hear the Word of God from BLC in a podcast. They can still hear the Word of God from BLC on a live stream. We have people who join us in the middle of the week for small groups, Bible study, service activities that are not necessarily in the walls of this sanctuary on Sunday morning. So building lasting community, I hope what you will see is, yes, the day of 2 services is not near, but I'm hoping that the days of multiple touch points to gather as chunks of the community will multiply in the coming months and year. Does that make sense? Bill?
I heard someplace that there's a few people from South Carolina, Georgia, Canada that tune into the live stream.
Yeah, there are definitely, Bill's question was, are there people from other states, even other countries that tune into the live stream? And the answer is definitely yes. Some people who've moved away from this community of faith still tune in to stay connected. That absolutely happens, which simply means that the boundaries of who's part of Bethlehem are more porous than ever before. And rather than try to restrict that ever more, we're interested in continuing to push the edges and meet people where they are, rather than wait for them to come in here. And that underscores everything Pastor Amy said about communication. That means communication styles that center on what happens in this building on Sunday morning is going to be exclusive to people who might be a little bit closer to those edges. And we want our communication to reach people wherever they are. And that's part of why we're trying to invest in having a more of a social media presence, more of a virtual presence, because people show up there before they ever make the decision to come in 3 dimensions in this space. And quite frankly, they won't choose to come in 3 dimensions in this space unless they've had a prior interaction or experience with someone from this community inviting them to do that. And those invitations largely happen through the connections outside of these walls.
I just also, Bill, I want to respond to your question and just say, we got actually a thank you note in the mail this week, along with a check from someone who said, I am so grateful for your weekly live stream. I tune in every week from South Carolina. And so, I mean, there are people who are as connected as anyone that we see within the walls of this sanctuary on a Sunday morning.
People, I don't use live stream, so otherwise they
Yep.
have to come in or by scaling.
Yeah. So Bill's comment is just, as someone who doesn't participate through social media or doesn't do websites, the only way that communicates for him is through snail mail. And so we are making sure that, as we've moved to a weekly email newsletter, we make paper copies, and we have a list of people like Bill and others in the community who only communicate through paper, and we're making sure that they have access to the information as well. So that's something that we are conscious of, and we are we're aware of, and we're trying to attend to, and we keep asking, if you know of other people like that, please let us know so we can add them to our list. I think what you will notice is different. Bill probably can attest to this. We're not spending as much time making things that we put in print pretty. We're spending more time making things that get sent out by email look more accessible and be something that when you get in your email box, you actually want to read it because it's not so long. And the reason we do that is because the people that are accessing online communication are the primary people. That's the primary way that we communicate. So we are trying to, I hope you notice, we are trying to make a concerted effort to communicate more succinctly with you.
Pray for us.
This is no small feat.
So wouldn't you want to, I'm talking virtual now. I mean, virtual for me and online, it just, this is not what I.
Yep.
But if you had a virtual system that, so they can see everything.
So that's the kind of thing the Sanctuary Refresh team is just making sure. I mean, we have some pretty great technology up here, and we can continue to expand both the the actual hardware. Thank you, the hardware for it. But it also becomes a software question. When we are relying on a small group of volunteers who need to learn this software and need to keep up with us in worship, we do not want to overtax our volunteers because we want them to keep volunteering. And we already are on a shoestring, not even shoestring budget, they're volunteers, but like we work them really hard for what they do. And we don't have a whole lot of support for them yet. As Pastor Amy mentioned, you know, in the office, we're catching up on technology. We are not the technology gurus. So whatever they have been able to produce has all been a matter of their own research and work and volunteer efforts. So that's the kind of question we want to attend to between the Sanctuary Refresh and between staffing for this future reality, or this current reality that will also lead us into the future, is to make sure that our live stream's not an afterthought, but it is part of producing worship every week in a fulsome way.
Pastors,
Yes, Mike?
one of our remote attendees likes the fact that you repeat the questions that they can't hear.
You are welcome, remote attendee. Because I did it, all right? I was doing it. Okay, just making sure I actually repeated it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else on this? I will add just one note. As Pastor Amy said, a lot of what has continued as smoothly as it has this summer is because of a long list of volunteers and the two of us expanding the duties and that little point on our job descriptions that says other duties as requested or needed. That list is pretty long, so we're really grateful for your grace when things do not happen as smoothly or as quickly or as efficiently as they could. And I think part of what we're saying is that grace will need to continue to be extended as activities ramp up this fall, which is simply an opportunity for more hands to make this work as light as possible. So we thank you for the grace you've already extended, and we thank you in advance for continuing to be gracious and asking, how can we help in figuring this out as we move forward?
Is there a timeline for any of this?
Yesterday. We are working as quickly as we can. Judy asked us if there's a timeline. And really, I mean, we're working as quickly as we can. We've been in as kind of close communication as we can with Capra Strategy to put some of those pieces in place, which will define or help us get the information we need to define the job description for the person or persons we need on staff. One of the realities of the virtual world is that you can contract out for little pieces of all sorts of stuff now, especially virtually. And so what are the pieces that we can say, oh, we have a really specific contract for this to do one piece of it? Like we have with Capra Strategy, we have a contract with them to do some of the back end of our website. So we don't need a website person on staff. We need somebody like me who learned the software enough to make the updates to our website each week. I can post the bulletin on there and some other basic things, but I can't design the website. So we got to figure out what's the split between the things we can have either Capra or people like that do behind the scenes that you all never even need to know the name of, versus what are the pieces in the job description on site here. And we're working as quickly as we can to identify that. In a perfect world, we'd love to have the position filled when we ramp up in September, but that doesn't feel realistic. So we're simply trying to go as fast as we can.
And because of that, I think I am aware that I have kind of some growing lists of things that I think if we could get some additional kind of volunteer support as we think through to September to pick up some of those pieces in the short term until we get some staff in place. I'm aware of those, and so I'm trying to think about those and identify those.
And I happen to know that our live stream team is 4 people, so if you want to join the live stream team, like Chris Metz gives you 2 thumbs up, or if you know of somebody with some of those skills that wants to learn, because that's an important part of what we do, and volunteers are not always going to be available.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, Sundays this fall.
You heard me mention this morning that we have a very short survey in that it doesn't take a long time to fill out, but it's also very short term. We'd love responses by Tuesday, and we're just going to take a look at them. We're just asking questions about either considering moving our Sunday worship time and considering if moving the time would expand the pool of people who would be present in person. So that's really what we're trying to get at. If we moved the time a little bit later, would that make worship more accessible for some people who find 9 o'clock a burden to try to be present in person? So that's really at the heart of the question. We ask 1 per family to fill out the survey. We have some paper copies if you prefer to do it that way. People at home, we really would love for you to fill this out as well. And we are going to be working full speed ahead in the next couple of weeks to kind of put a plan together for the fall, and then also to communicate that with you so that you know what it's going to look like.
Questions? Okay.
The next item is a financial update. So since this is the 3rd quarter in the financial year actually runs October 1st to the end of September. The end of the year one will be presented at the annual meeting. But Glenda is our treasurer, and she is, I'm hopefully online if there are any questions that I can't answer. And of course, just turn to the wrong page because it's easier for me to see it. So from financial results so far this year, from receipts, we are about 1% less than expected, but we are about 1% lower than expected for expenses. So overall, as she says in our meetings, we're about where we should be right now. The areas of that are other areas, we successfully established the Investment in Ministries Fund. That was something that we're this year that I think most folks are aware of, which was utilizing that $25,000 from the Memorial Fund. The rents that we have collected are a little bit less than operating expenses for the house, and that is being resolved. Hopefully it will be resolved by the end of the financial year. And not surprisingly, as everyone is aware with the current financial situation of the world, the value of our donated securities have fallen over the past 6 months. However, the current values still reflect significant capital gains. The detailed financial reports are available if anybody does need them, but we do go into a little bit more detail at the annual report. Any questions for me? All right, that was easy. Thank you, Glenda, for making that easy for me. I do appreciate that. And that's it. So thanks everyone for coming. I will do the closing prayer. See, I'm going to get better at this. So for closing prayer, I'm actually going to say something that my whenever I take communion, I always think of my dad. And the thing that he always said every day, and I think I've said this at the last quarterly meeting, was, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. So the prayer for my closing prayer is, Dear God, let us find ways to rejoice in this day and to look for your presence with us today and every day. Amen.